remember. When in a classroom like this, we learned about the sacrifices our forefathers made to build this great country of ours. And most important, every boy and girl knew about our greatest hero, the father of our country, George Washington.
Who can tell me who the father of our country is? Emma.
George Washington.
But somehow things have changed. What's taught or not taught clearly shows that something's missing. Like you, I grew up with a deep respect for the father of our country. Hello, I'm Fred Thompson. I'm speaking to you from George Washington's home at Mount Vernon. Throughout my life, and especially as a senator, I always tried to live up to his ideals, his vision of what it meant to be an American. You can't work in government very long and not realize just how much of this country's greatness flows from George Washington. Father of our country isn't just an expression, it's the literal truth. His character, his sacrifice, his unwavering commitment to fair, open, and decent government define who we are as a nation to this day.
Washington was our greatest president. He was the one at the start. He held it together and he set the example. He was the defining model of what the president should be and do. We could not have been more fortunate.
George Washington and his revolutionaries changed the world. And we tell that story at Mount Vernon. We show how that conviction married to determination, decisiveness, forcefulness, a natural ability to command, and yes, integrity, in one man could bring together an army, bring together a nation, and then, after the rebellion succeeded, lead that nation, set it off on a good path in ways that changed the rest of the world.
Historians have called him the indispensable man, and that's exactly what he was. But these days, our young people have a staggering lack of knowledge about George Washington. The folks here at Mount Vernon see it every day. And for years, it's been getting worse. Visitors, especially the young, just don't know as much about this man as we did.
We started to investigate why, and that took us to the classroom. And we discovered that Washington has been almost eliminated from many history textbooks. His name has actually been taken off some schools. George Washington's birthday, which was a meaningful holiday. We hear from older people all the time how they had cherry pie for dinner, or they went to a parade in town. Now that's President's Day. It's an innocuous 3-day shopping holiday.
You see survey after survey asking people of major events that people ought to know about our history in our country, and they can't even get it into the right half century, much less knowing what actually happened.
Modern history textbooks have less than 90% of the information on George Washington compared with books from 30 years ago. One textbook gives a total of just 33 lines of text to Washington, but dedicates 213 to Marilyn Monroe. It's no wonder historian David McCullough has referred to this younger generation as historically illiterate.
If you don't understand the Revolutionary War, and if you don't understand the Revolution, and you don't know anything about George Washington, you do not understand the history of your own country.
Many of our foreign visitors are much more in awe of Washington than we are. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know whether they're taught more history than we are, but I've seen some of the Japanese that come and just are completely enamored with him.
We had a foreign leader come to Mount Vernon not long ago, and he was shown Mount Vernon, given a tour, and he went and he laid a wreath on the tomb. And as he came out of the tomb, it was clear that his eyes were filled with tears. And the person standing there said, "What is it about George Washington that would make you feel this way?" He said, "George Washington was a man of great vision. He was not just for America. He was for all humanity."
In the darkest days of the Revolutionary War, when our army had shrunk to just a few thousand men, when the British occupied our major cities and seemed on the verge of crushing our revolution, Washington never gave up hope. He never faltered. He continued to fight. to struggle, sometimes to starve, but always to pray for the cause he believed in. That cause was us, our nation. Now, he, more than any other individual, made it possible. I believe we need the lesson of George Washington's character and leadership to guide us today. Maybe now more than ever.
His picture really should be, along with Abraham Lincoln, back in every schoolroom, as it used to be. And this isn't ancestor worship, or this isn't old-fashioned history. This is reality. This is the truth.
Sacrifice, character. I mean, he was all those things. And we've got to get those things back in the hearts of our young.
But here at Mount Vernon, they aren't just talking about it, they're doing something about it. Something important for our future as Americans.
I think we've been doing a great job for over a century, teaching people about Washington the farmer, Washington the creative designer and architect and horticulturist, Washington the family man. But that's just not enough anymore, because people come here not knowing the most important things about Washington's life, and that's his military and political leadership. So we have no space whatsoever to teach those lessons. So as much as we never like putting modern structures on this wonderful old estate, we think we have to break that rule now. We have to put some very discrete structures at Mount Vernon that will be the home of our new experiences that tell the stories about his military leadership, his entrepreneurial business operations, and his presidential leadership. They're just vital lessons that we've got to teach.
That's why I'm glad you're taking a few minutes to watch this important video, and why I'm sure you're going to want to be a part of this exciting new venture at Mount Vernon. Their plan is bold and visionary. In every way, it's as big as the ideals and vision of the father of our country himself. Right now, about 1 million visitors a year enjoy their tour of Washington's beloved home and estate at Mount Vernon. But there's so much more of the Washington story Mount Vernon wants and needs to tell. While visitors have been impressed and inspired, now they're going to be able to learn more about Washington's great accomplishments.
We're thrilled to be the #1 historic house in America, to have 1 million people coming to Mount Vernon every year. And we're even more thrilled that when we survey those people, they tell us that they want to know more about the real George Washington.
At Mount Vernon, you see George Washington as the planter, as the farmer, as the family man. You don't see him as a general, and you don't see him as a president. And I think that when we're all put together, we will have incorporated his whole life. And I think then you'll get the real picture of the man.
Mount Vernon is going to be transformed. The goal? Safeguard the legacy of America's greatest hero. Make him the shining example of courage, character, and conviction for new generations of Americans, just as he was to earlier generations. This ambitious program is called To Keep Him First. Three new buildings are being constructed on the estate, over 50,000 square feet. Of course, Mount Vernon's historic commitment to preserving Washington's estate and grounds is an integral part of the plan. The vast majority of the construction is totally underground. In fact, most of the new facilities will be under a tranquil pasture with sheep grazing above. Mount Vernon will remain perfectly preserved.
His essence is all over this place. He loved his wife, he loved his grandchildren, and he was a family man. All the values that we're trying to inculcate into our children, he espoused them. He lived it. He really lived it. And that's the best example we could possibly teach a child.
To be involved in a project like this that could mean so very much for the future of our country and for the lives of all our young. I mean, it's overwhelming to us sometime when we realize what we might be able to do here to save our youth.
Mount Vernon's new facilities will use sight, sound, and breakthrough technology to bring the 18th century alive. Through the exciting interactive exhibits, visitors will literally be able to watch George Washington grow up. From young surveyor and frontier fighter in the French and Indian War, to agricultural pioneer and successful businessman, to Revolutionary War leader. to President of the Constitutional Convention, to America's foremost statesman and the only president ever elected unanimously. And he achieved that distinction not once, but twice. You know, there are a lot of qualities of Washington's life that people don't know about. And some of what they do know is wrong. Washington didn't chop down the cherry tree, but he was a man of extraordinary integrity. He never threw a dollar across the Potomac. But at 6 feet 3 inches tall, he was physically imposing, incredibly athletic, and a superb horseman. Another thing people don't know about Washington is his amazing accomplishments as a businessman and entrepreneur.
He is known as the first president. He's known as the first commander-in-chief, father of our country. But he also was just a great entrepreneur and did many things that where people just don't know about. Well, they come to Mount Vernon, they find that out.
We have this exciting opportunity to build an education center and a museum that will teach the truth about George Washington. It's fine to see the glorious mansion, but these two places, and especially the education center, will bring him alive.
We can shake our heads about the paucity of education in American schools, about the nation's history, and about the story of George Washington. Or we can try to do something about it. And one of the best things to do is to equip Mount Vernon to tell that story, to show that story, and to make it available both to my generation, to their children, and to their grandchildren.
What's great about the Education Center, it'll be bringing in new technologies in ways that children are accustomed to watching entertainment. Now those methods and modes will be utilized for them to actually learn something worthwhile about George Washington and the history of our country.
In every way, the folks here at Mount Vernon have worked to make this project as big as the man they intend to honor. Their plans aren't just for the short term. They've created a concept that will attract, educate, and inspire visitors for generations. And like that unprecedented first rescue of the estate by the dedicated ladies of Mount Vernon over 150 years ago, their labors deserve the support of patriotic Americans, Americans like you. This bold new venture also vastly increases Mount Vernon's resources for educational outreach. With new capabilities, they'll be able to distribute lesson plans, films, and other Washington material directly to schools and classrooms in every state in the Union.
It's surely shocking to me that modern presidents, whether they served one term and got kicked out, or 2 terms and really weren't recognized as a very good president, they all get a presidential library. And yet, George Washington, who has much more to teach us than any of those modern presidents, really doesn't have that kind of resource, that kind of center that can not only welcome people who want to come to the center to learn about every aspect of his life, but a center that also reaches out so that we can supply the materials that students need in the classroom and that people would like to have even in their homes all across this nation.
Even when textbooks failed, Mount Vernon will be there to introduce George Washington to new generations of Americans. Altogether, to keep him first is the biggest thing to happen here since the Mount Vernon Ladies Association first rescued the estate from the brink of ruin over 150 years ago.
The original ladies of Mount Vernon did something miraculous. Without the help of the government, they rescued this plantation, and they've been opening it up to the public ever since.
When Anne Pamela's mother floated up the Potomac and saw the mess of the house and asked her daughter to make it her life's work, that was a significant moment in history, and the daughter wanted to do it, and it was really hard 150 years ago for a single lady to raise the kind of money she did.
Imagine raising $200,000 in 1853, and as a woman, she couldn't even publish her name because women were not out in the public domain. And she was determined because she felt that George Washington was so important to the country that they had to save the place where he lived and died so the future generations would have it there.
As always, Mount Vernon receives no taxpayer funding. It's a totally private operation. The original ladies who saved George Washington's home and estate did so with voluntary contributions, and that's the way it's been ever since. It's impossible to overestimate George Washington's contribution to America. Time and time again, when men like Jefferson, Adams, Madison, and Hamilton had their backs to the wall, they always turned to the leadership and steady hand of one man. The other founding fathers, great as they were relied on and looked to George Washington, and so should we. Mount Vernon's goal is not to attract more visitors. It's about transforming the visitor's experience into something much more meaningful, something that will leave ordinary Americans, especially young people, with a genuine sense of who this great man really was. Something that will inspire the 350,000 young people who come through the gates every year to respect themselves and their country.
Throughout the history of our republic, George Washington is that touchstone. I was in President Bush's office, and he had all these pictures of portraits of Texas, so he remembers Texas, but he has George Washington right there when you're sitting at the desk in the Oval Office. Who's looking straight at him as you look up? It's George Washington.
The bottom line is to re-educate our young kids about George Washington. That's what we think the bottom line of the Donald W. Reynolds Museum and Education Center is.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if the country did adopt the character of George Washington and all children sought to be like him in so many ways?
That's why supporting this project deserves your serious consideration. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for modern-day patriots to step forward and give something back to this great country, and to the one man who gave everything he had to bring it forth.
We ought to be down on our knees every day thanking God that we are part of this country. And we ought to know about the people who made it possible and thank them, in effect, by showing interest in them.
I think those that come together now to achieve the goal of rescuing Washington will be doing a job just as important as those original ladies who rescued his home.
I encourage you to look over the enclosed prospectus to help decide an appropriate giving category for you. I urge you to strongly consider contributing at a level that will allow your name to be displayed here at Mount Vernon. I can't think of a higher honor for an American than to be associated with the name of the father of our country. But please act quickly. Many of the galleries and exhibits have already been endowed, and donor naming opportunities are limited. At whatever level you decide to participate, this will be one of the most important contributions an American can make. Nothing's more important than rescuing the memory of our greatest hero. And there's no greater legacy for each of us to pass on to our children and grandchildren. No other institution has the mission of safeguarding the legacy and memory of George Washington. That responsibility lies here at Mount Vernon and with you.